First years, hello and welcome. Today we do another video. This time it's about plant reproduction. It's about section 5.4, the first part, so 5.4.1. Alright, so in the book today we are at page 138 and 139. So you can look it up if you want to. Let's go back to the start. So we have a seed which germinates, and if it germinates it grows into a plant. And the plant eventually will form flowers, and the flowers, if they are pollinated, they will form fruit. The fruit is then released and dispersed, and afterwards some of the plant dies, and the seed which was in the fruit is now going to be released and will grow to a new plant. So this is plant reproduction. Let's find out how they do that. Alright, so first of all, what is this, what we see here? Do you have any guess? No? Well, actually, these are flowers. Yes, but really strange flowers, right? So let's zoom in on another type. These are flowers, but these are kind of strange, right? Because you see all their anthers and the stigmas hanging out of it. So is this a real flower? Yes, it is a real flower. But this is a flower which is pollinated by wind. Pollination means that the pollen grains and the egg cells of a plant fuse together in order to form a seed. Well, pollen grains of wind pollinators, they are not pollinated by insects, but they are pollinated by wind. And wind doesn't care if it's a beautiful and bright colored petaled flower. It doesn't care if it smells well. It doesn't care. Wind doesn't care for nectar. Wind just blows. And it blows everywhere. So it's best to expose your anthers and your pistils as wide open as you can to the wind. Wind-pollinated flowers, they also have loads and loads of pollen grains. So if you're suffering from hay fever, you probably are suffering from plants which are wind-pollinated, because they produce so enormous amounts of pollen grains. And when you look very close up to their pollen grains, you also find out that these plants, those pollen grains, have wings to fly really in the air. So what's the function of those pollen grains? Well, those pollen grains out of the anthers will land upon a stigma. And that stigma is sticky, and it takes it. And the pollen grain is led to the egg cell, and together they fuse into a seed. And that seed becomes the base of the fruit. And the seed, as you know, has a germ and a cotyledon. Right, so these are wind-pollinated plants. So remember, they have dull petals, so not brightly colors. There's no scent. They have very feathery pistils. The stamen hang outside the flower. They have lots of pollen, and the pollen have wings. Let's move over to another one. Yes, it is insect pollinators. Not bee Mario, of course, but it's an insect pollinator. What do we know about insect pollinators? These are the flowers you know, right? Tulips. Brightly colored, they smell good, they have nectar inside. So what can we tell about this? These are insect pollinators. So if you put a vase full of these flowers on your desk or on your table, you know that insects want to come as well and visit those flowers, because they know they get a reward, and the reward is nectar. Nectar they produce, it's a syrupy and very sweet fluid, and while they're there, they also pick up some of the pollen grain. Okay, in this tulip, you can see there's numbers in it, and they, of course, refer to different parts of the plant. 8 refers to the petals of the flower, and if you want to compare it, you can compare it to figure 2 at page 138. The petals of these flowers are yellow, and the ones in your book are purple, but they have the same purpose, just to attract insects. Number 2 and number 3, they belong to the same thing. That belongs to the pistil of the pistil of the flower. And the pistil of a flower, it has a stigma, a style, and an ovary. More about that later. The stigma is the point where pollen grains will stick to it. Through the filament it will grow, the style, into the ovary where the egg cells are. So maybe you've already guessed it, but the pistil is the female part of the flower. There's also a male part. The male part is called the stamen. In this picture you can see it pointed with 5 and 4. This part of the stamen is called the filament. And the brown part is called the anther. Inside the anther, there are the pollen grains. So the pollen grains, how does it work with insect pollinators? Well, insects, they get into this flower, they drink from the nectar, which is down here, the nectary, they pick up some of the pollen grains, fly to another flower, and drop it on the sticky stigmas. So that way, the insects help to pollinate the flowers. So in this way, you could say this is how plant sex works. Either via the wind or via the insects. Okay, so look at this one. This is a bee orchid. And this orchid mimics the form of a bee. So this looks like if there is another insect. Inside this orchid, there's sweet nectar. When a bee comes and gets inside, it is stamped with pollen grain packages on its back. When it goes to another orchid, there is a sticky stigma which takes off the pollen grains. So it's a fantastic system. All right, now we have to skip to a slide which is much farther away, because this is all about fruit, which are also important. But this was your plants assignment. See, I'm just skipping over it now. Okay, let's go to this picture. Yes, so this is also a beautiful flower which is opened. I think it's a lily flower. And in this lily flower you can easily see number 5. Which was it again? The petals. Yes. So the petals are not so brightly colored to us, but to insects who can see ultraviolet colors, they're incredibly beautiful, and they all want to land on it. So you also see that 4 and 3 again are the male parts. Remember, it's called the stamen. And this is the filament here, and here we have the anther, inside which the pollen grains are. This one also comes with this structure here, which is of course a pistil, although not a very clear one. The top of it is the stigma, and this part is called the style, in which it leads all the way down to the ovary, which you can't see. So let's have a look at the picture here. And in this picture, you see that the brightly colored petals are there, number 1s, right? And now it's more structurized in a way that you can see it. Actually has a lot of numbers here, right? So let me walk you through. Let's start with the pistil. This is the pistil, and this part here is the stigma. This is the style. It leads down all the way to the ovaries, and the little beans you see here, those are the ovules. Inside the ovules is an egg cell. So the pollen grains, which are inside the anther, will land onto the stigma, then build their way through the style into the ovules, and then reach the egg cells, where the fusion of the egg cell and the pollen grain cell happens, and then you get a new seed. So you can already tell that in this ovule there is a possibility there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 seeds will be possible from this fruit. So you can already tell, right, which kind of flower this is. Yes, of course, this is an insect flower. It looks nice, it is bright and open, and it welcomes the insects. It's also nice for us to have at home. Okay, we also find flowers attractive, maybe because of the same reason. Although insects want to use it for their nectar, of course. So is there more to see? Oh yes, there's some protective layers around it, and there's a stalk here, and here this is the male part, the whole male part. What was it called again? Yes, the stamen. Okay, and the stamen has a filament and an anther, and here you can see the pollen grains inside. All right. So at the start of this video, I told you that they pollinate via the wind or via animals. But this way they pollinate, there are some differences between plants. Some plants do self-pollination, which means that they are plants which have a lot of flowers. Some of the flowers are males, some of them are females, and that means that pollen grains get from one flower to another flower on the same plant. That's what we call self-pollination. Also, even this flower would happen, there are pollen grains coming from this anther onto this stigma, it would be self-pollination. It also happens, for example, in the tulip we saw earlier, that the pollen grains travel with an insect to a totally different plant, to another plant, another tulip. It has to be a tulip though. You cannot provide pollen grains from an oak tree to a tulip or vice versa. That won't work. So pollen grains from one tulip flower are then transported by a bee or another insect to another tulip flower where it reaches the stigma. And that's what we call cross-pollination. So a crossing of those plants. And a crossing of those plants is very good for the DNA actually. It's very good for the genes, and maybe there are some variations coming up so that the plant becomes stronger against predators, against animals who want to eat it, or it can even produce better fruits. This technique of cross-pollination, we already use it for thousands of years. So humans have become masters of cross-pollination on plants. And for example, the mustard plant is a mustard plant with really tiny yellow flowers. We happened to cross-pollinate it over and over again. And now we got, for example, we got cauliflower out of it. Cauliflower out of a mustard plant. Romanesco from a mustard plant. Broccoli comes from a mustard plant. Brussels sprouts come from a mustard plant. So these plants have very versatile and huge capabilities of becoming a lot of different things. And that's because of that cross-pollination. All right, so what I told you today is a part of the plant. I told you about a male part and a female part. I told you about pollination, self-pollination or cross-pollination. And I told you about the way pollination happens. Is it pollinated by wind, where the flowers are really dull and they produce no nectar, but they hang their stamens and their pistils outside and they produce loads of pollen grains which go with the wind and land somewhere, hopefully on another flower with the right stigma? Or there are insect pollinators, which are beautiful, brightly colored. They have pollen grains which are sticky, which are big. They stick on the skin of insects and they stick on the stigmas. And those insect flowers also have the nectaries, which produce a lot of nectar. I also showed you how when a pollen grain lands on a stigma, it finds itself a way through the style into the ovule, into the egg cell, then fuses together and becomes a seed. So next time, I guess we will talk about how a seed becomes a fruit and is then dispersed by wind or by birds, by animals, other animals than birds, by the sea, by self, by exploding. There's a whole range of things the plants can do. Okay, thanks for today. Thanks for watching. See you next time. This has been a long video. Yes, month. I'd like to say you are able now to fill out questions 3 till 7. You'll find it page 78, 79 in your workbook. Okay, this be all of it. Thank you very much for your attention. Mont.